Good morning everyone, I'm Gabriel.
And I'm Joel.
Today we'll be explaining something we all do without even thinking, which is breathing. So we made a bell jar lung model to show how we actually breathe and how these bell jar lung models represent our lungs. Let's explore the science behind it.
First, let's talk about how lungs works. Our lungs are part of the respiratory system, whose job is to bring oxygen into the body and remove carbon dioxide. The lungs themselves cannot move on their own. They need help from a muscle called the diaphragm. This here is the diaphragm, which sits just below the ribcage. Here, this is the diaphragm, this is the ribcage. When we breathe in, like shown here, right, the diaphragm contracts and downwards, creating more space inside the chest for the lungs to grow larger. Because the chest cavity becomes larger, the pressure inside the lungs drops. Air always moves from high pressure to low pressure. So air quickly rushes into lungs through the nose and mouth. Inside the lungs, the air travels to the trachea, then the bronchi, and then smaller tubes called bronchioles, until it reaches millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. This is where gas exchange happens. Oxygen passes into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide moves out to be exhaled. When we breathe out, the diaphragm relaxes and moves outward, like this. This makes the chest cavity smaller again, increases the pressure inside the lungs, and forces the air out. This cycle repeats every time we breathe. Now, let's look at how the bell jar lung model represents this process. Like I showed you before, in the model, the bell jar represents the chest cavity, which protects and surrounds the lungs. The red balloons here inside the jar represent the lungs. They can expand and collapse like this, just like real lungs, but they cannot move on their own. The rubber sheet at the plastic sheet at the bottom represents the diaphragm over here, as you can see. When I pull the plastic sheet downward, just like the diaphragm contracting, the space inside the jar becomes larger. The pressure drops, and then the balloon inflates with air, as you can see here. This represents inhalation. When you push the rubber sheet upward, the space becomes smaller, pressure increases, and the balloons deflate. This represents exhalation. Although the model is simple, it clearly shows the relationship between volume, pressure, and breathing. It also helps us understand that lungs don't suck air in by themselves. Instead, the diaphragm changes the pressure in the chest cavity to make air move in and out. Let's hear from our friend who made the bell jar lung model.
So here I made it by using two balloons, a plastic and a plastic bottle which is cut into half, and for the tools I used scissors, a hot glue gun, and a few more things. So here I made it. So first step to making this is by basically first you must cut this bottle into half, then attach this plastic into the bottle using a regular tape which can hold this together, and that would make it look like a diaphragm. These balloons here, they are lungs. These are lungs. They're also there because that's just how our lungs look, and that's how it's colored. So here this tube represents the trachea, because these eventually lead to the lungs. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so in conclusion, the bell jar lung model is a great way to visualize how our diaphragm works and chest cavity work together to help us breathe. It shows that inhaling and exhaling are all about changing pressure and volume, just like how I'm showing you, just like in our real lungs. Thank you for listening.
The purpose of making this bell jar lung model is to have a better understanding of how our lungs work.